Hi, my name is John Sluter. My mother was Danish. She told us stories about living as a Danish child in World War II, and I've studied some of the history. I'm making this video because Denmark is in the news in the United States, and I feel that Americans don't know Denmark. And so I wanted to fill in a little bit of the gap of information. Denmark capitulated to Germany pretty quickly. They had a very tiny air force. They sent it up against the Luftwaffe. They were shot down. Its air force was eliminated. And these bombers were flying over Copenhagen with their bomb bay doors open. My mother remembers as a child looking out the window and looking up and seeing these bombers flying over. Copenhagen would have been annihilated. The King of Denmark had no choice. But they made the best deal they could. They retained some autonomy and some protection for some of their citizens that other nations did not have. They insisted that Hitler and the Nazis and the German occupiers not act against the Jews as they had in other countries. And for a while, the Germans stuck to that bargain. Then, for whatever reason, they decided not to. But by that time, a relationship had been formed, and there was a German official who whispered into Danish ears that the Germans were going to round up the Danish Jews. The word got out, obviously. And the Danish Jews, most of them, 90% of them, went into hiding. They were hidden in their neighbors' cellars or in church basements. And slowly, they made their way to Danish ferry boats that convoyed them at peril to their lives across the strait into neutral Sweden, where they were protected for the rest of the war. I remember Mom telling me the story about how they started protecting the Danish passengers when the Germans started figuring out that they were being ferried to Sweden, and they started bringing bloodhounds to search out hidden Jews on these little fishing boats. What they came up with is that they mixed cocaine and blood and sprinkled it on the deck. The bloodhounds would sniff that concoction, and then their noses wouldn't be worth a damn. 10% of the population of Denmark's Jews, and by the way, this wasn't just the Danish Jews, the Jews born in Denmark, but for a while, some Jews from other countries had sought exile and protection in Denmark as refugees, and Denmark insisted that they be included among the protected Jews of Denmark. 10% of the Danish Jewish population did not believe this rumor. They thought it was alarmist, and they were scooped up. They were sent to internment camps out of Denmark. I should say that something that's somewhat controversial is that the Danish civil servants, my grandfather included, stayed on the job. But here's why that was important. Because after a few months, the Danish civil servants started organizing care packages for their citizens in these internment camps for people who had been taken from Denmark. I actually don't know, but I assume it did include those who had simply been arrested there. Anyway, because of those care packages that the civil servants sent, if you were Danish, a Danish Jew, and if you were in a German internment camp, because of those care packages with clothing, food, and other survival items, almost certainly you survived to the end of the war. What would have happened if the civil service resigned? I know that some people, some historians feel that they should have, or some people do. But then who would they have filled the civil service with? Well, not with people who cared about their fellow citizens in those internment camps. People lived through the war because the civil servants stayed on the job to keep Denmark running. My mother was part of the Danish Underground. She's been gone for a long time, so I guess I'm missing her. Anyway, she was pretty plucky, and she was on a train. She was a courier. She was with her fellow courier, a young man about her age. And there was a rule in Denmark that if you were Danish, you had to give up your seat on a train or public transportation to any German. And a German soldier came on the train where Mother was, carrying documents as a courier for the Danish Underground. This soldier demanded her seat, and she refused to give it up. Well, the German by himself could not do much because it was a crowded train compartment, and he wouldn't have been safe if he had tried to arrest a Dane. So he went to get some friends and to do the arrest. And Mother and her friend charged in the opposite direction. As they ran, they said, "The Germans are after us." And all of the other Danes opened up, made space for them to flee through the train. From compartment to compartment. And as the Germans came to arrest her, the Germans closed together like the Red Sea and impeded their progress. They were able to get to the next train station without being seized, and they jumped off the train and fled into the crowd. I just thought, for some reason, I want people to know this about the courage of the Danish people and their solidarity with their not only fellow citizens, but fellow humanity in the face of this oppressive military presence on their soil. They did what, I'm not here to throw stones at other countries, but they stood up and they stood out.